but in a British museum. I did not know Dharampal till 1977. I think most of you are not born at that time. So I discovered Dharampal in a library in Amsterdam where I was doing my PhD. I was doing a work on history of science and technology in India and China, and I had very little information about science and technology in India, except for some very simple books which were not written, not worth even quoting. And then I went to the South Asia Institute library where I found this book which had just been published a few months before. Now how this librarian, they must be having a very great skill, those librarians. They know where to order books, how fast to order books. They have a warning system by which they get the books. So the book was in the library when I saw it, and then I took it up, and that changed my view of everything. You can imagine the impact. Reading just one book. There are some people who change their lives reading one book, sometimes an article, sometimes a poem. But reading of India, science and technology in 18th century India just completely bowled me up. And I must have picked up the book in April. By June I started writing my PhD, and in 4 months it was over, and I got my PhD in November and came back to India. After reading and writing Dharampal, it was not possible to stay in Europe anymore. Anyway, I had no intentions of staying there, but this became a very great reason to come back. And once I came back, of course, then while I was there, some of my friends had come to Amsterdam, so they said that, I mentioned about Dharampal ji, so they said that, but he is in London. So I said, Dharampal ji is in London, I thought he is in India. They said, no, he is in London, if you want, come, we will go and take you to see him. So we got on a flight, and from Amsterdam we took a flight, went to see him in London. And he was there very much alive. His wife, and then Roswitha and David, his son, and a couple of, at least 5 of them were there. And we had dinner together, discussed everything. And one of the most foolish things I've ever said in my life to a person, I said, Dharampal ji, when I go back to India, I am going to make you very famous. This is the stupidity of youth. That I could go and tell a man like that, after, because I thought that nobody was there, nobody knew him, he was hiding in a Panjapole somewhere in London or something. I said, I'm going to make you very, very well known in India and all that. Part of it actually is true in the end. It's not that it's not true. Because after that, the decolonizing history was published in India, I'm surprised that Rakesh ji has a copy in his bag. He took it out yesterday and he was showing it to me, a very old copy. All pages have become yellow. I was in Chennai. Attending some human rights investigation, and I was we were attacked by the police, and of course some of our friends took us to the MLA's hostel in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai to wash up and all that, clean up and all that. And while I was walking to my room, I looked, there was a door which was very open. This was characteristic of Dharampal. The door was wide open, and there he was at a table writing something. And I stood him and said, Dharampal ji, you were here. He said, I went in, hugged him, and then after that introduced him. The same evening, the PPST, Patriotic People and Science-Oriented Technology people, had come to see me at the press conference. So they said, sir, we want to talk to you about your book and all that. So I said, what do you want to know? No, Dharampal. I said, you don't need to talk to me. The original is there. So they said, where? That big, eyes has become 2 inches wide. So I gave them, I said, go to the MLA's hostel in this particular room. He's sitting there. So they left me. Forget about wanting to come and see me. They left me, took a rickshaw and went directly to see him. And then Dharampal's entry into the Indian consciousness really began. Because the PPST people were a really devoted, dedicated group of high-class intellectuals. Jyotinder Bajaj, M.D. Srinivasan, first class. They were trained at IITs and whatever, and they were extraordinary people, and they were able to take his work, put in a lot more under his direction, put it all together, and then begin to. It took about, I think, maybe 30 years before all the output of Dharampal ji has been put together. And it's a phenomenal output. No scholar has ever done this in his life. At that time, there was no Xerox, there were no machines, there was no cameras, nothing. But he used to go every morning to the British Museum, take out the British archives, and then copy, then go home in the evening on that old Remington typewriter, and he used to type it all out. And when he came back to India, only trunks and trunks and trunks and trunks of material, of typed material. This is the man who comes back from London, just like Gandhiji had come many years before. He comes back with finally having seen what India was in the 18th century, but ironically through the eyes of Englishmen. That's the most amazing thing of it, because information comes from anywhere. Every record was based on something sent by some Englishmen who had gone to observe. They had not gone to judge. They had not gone to do anything. They had not gone to see whether it was superior or inferior. But they knew up to 1800 that this country was a dynamite of the most extraordinary ideas in the world. And they said, all that we need to do, just like the Japanese did much later, go, stay and copy. Go, stay and copy. And that is how the industrial revolution in the end eventually begins. It's a sort of a reverse flow. And those ideas now come back to us. But they come back to us as authentic information which we can look at and which we can even measure. So this was my experience with Dharampal ji for many years, 30, 40 years. And never in all those years did Dharampal ji ever say, this is my work, put my name here. Why have you published this without mentioning my name, which is almost difficult nowadays with academics. But this was the man and his generosity. He did not believe in any fundamental sense. It was because he was a perhaps man. He said, I don't know what I have done, what I have brought to light. I have no idea. It was of use to people, perhaps I have done something. That was his attitude. But never once, all this time, and Pawanji also will bear testimony to this, and so many others, never once did he say, have you put my name on it? Why have you not put my name on it? That was the extraordinary quality of the man. Very unassuming, very simple, always dressed in white khadi till the rest of his, till the end of his life. And as I said, he had a, when you talked about again, Govindachari talked about teacher and learning thing. He was learning till the end of his life. I mean, just about 5 or 6 years before his life, he gave me, when I went to see him, he gave me a book, 1,200 pages. I said, hey, kya hai kitab? This is a book about ants, he said, ants. Written by E.O. Wilson from Harvard University, 1,200 pages only on ants and the ecology of ants. He was reading it. And then he said, now I finished, you can take it. So I took it back with me, weighing actually 2 kilos or something to carry back. But this was the man who was in front of us. He had not stopped. And one thing that drove him was this whole Western civilization. How it had come up. What were his inner problems? What was the reason why it went across the rest of the world and oppressed and killed and damaged the environment everywhere? He wanted to know everything from the very beginning. So for British conquest, he went back to 10th century. To Norman conquest. He had big books about Norman conquest in his books. He was totally obsessed. And when he used to talk to us, we knew that this was a man who was driven. What we say in English, driven. I'm sorry to say, I don't know any academics today who are driven. Most of the universities are totally dead places. And that is why I'm saying it is a great contradiction that a person like that with no academic background and no academic credentials could produce such an enormous amount of contributions to what we call the academic reconstruction of today's world. Now, this subject today is basically on science and technology, but it's really shouldn't be really science and technology, because Dharampalji saw it in a holistic way. He didn't see his work on science and technology as different from his work on education, or different from his work on Panchayati Raj, or different from his work on any other issue that he wrote about. All of them were consistent, they all part. And so to understand the mind of the man, you've got to look at his forays into all these areas, because only again a driven man would go. Today, if you have a political scientist professor, he reads only political science books. He doesn't read sociology books, he doesn't read anthropology books, he doesn't read anything else. Because he says, why should I read? No use for my kamana. The students also become like that. Once I went to Goa University, this is 25 years ago, and the students said, so what are you going to talk about? So I said, I'm going to talk to you about these political issues. They said, sir, you don't talk about anything besides the syllabus. So I told them, thank you very much. I closed my hand, made namaskar to them, and I went. I never went back to Goa University again. Band kiya. But this man at his age was willing to read and think about all the disciplines, so that you had a multi-dimensional individual who could speak with great interest to anybody on literally any subject. And you could listen to him, because not only would he have a perspective on what was happening today, he would be able to link it to the British, you would be able to link it to some Dutch persons, you would be able to reach to whatever he had read there and make it very, very rich. And we were discussing once with him, this corruption Raj in India, where now for a job in the government you have to pay money. You want to be a police inspector, you have to pay. At that time it was 80,000, I think now it must be more than 4 lakh, 5 lakh. He said, look here, he said, ये तो हमारी तो नहीं है, ये हमारे परंपरा तो, this is not our tradition. And I said, what do you mean? He said, the association of money to be paid for a job is from England. Then he started giving examples from 1810, how every job in the British establishment you had to pay to get into. And the practice still prevails today, even with their parliament. House of Lords, you want to become a member of the House of Lords, you don't have to be elected. Like Swaraj Paul, you buy a peerage, automatically you're a member of the House of Lords. It's only a question of money, honey. Money. So the practice, many of the practices which we practice today thinking they're Indian, have really come with the British Raj. And unless you understand how the British organized their society into different economic classes, different practices and so on, then you will understand many of the things that are happening today, because we are blindly following many of those things. Of course, some of those things we have become very, very absurd. Now we have VIP, Yogi Adityanath ji is going through Benares, half the town gets closed because of 50 cars and all. There their Prime Minister now will go by train. But we have still got a huge heritage which we are not willing to give from our colonial past, which we love with great devotion, and we cling to it because we feel that somehow this is, I'm saying this happens everywhere, not just here. So Dharampalji has to be looked as a person who provided a window into how India functioned as a society. Somebody used the word stagnant in the morning. This word stagnant, I don't understand how stagnant comes from. It is, what was this society? How did it function? Part of the functioning today, even 15, 20 years ago, has been brilliantly narrated to you by Ashish Kamath, which is basically the work of Guruji Ravindra Sharma from Adilabad, from the Kala Ashram, who is actually one of the first-rate disciples of Dharampal. Actually, Pandit Guruji, Pandit Ravindra Sharma never said that he was a disciple of Mahatma Gandhi. He said he was a disciple of Dharampal. It is Dharampal ji, just what he did to me, the same thing he did to Guruji. He fixed him, he gave him a framework, and then he used that framework to open another sub-world of the people who live outside the so-called modern or modernity's boundaries in this country, how they function, and what are their traditions, what are their roles, and how they still survive even till today. But these are the creative geniuses because they set off other people, India, like Steve Jobs or whatever. These are the type of people who manage to incite other people to do more and more work and to get into newer and newer areas. So he provided in India, this 18th century book of his, he provided a total picture. Then he began to add the others, got a very comprehensive picture. And you said that by all means, this could not have been a stagnant society. Could never have been a stagnant society. And I have used, because this is a very famous subject ever since Narendra Modi mentioned it a few years ago, I've used the word, the exercise of plastic surgery, as a very simple way to show you how the attitudes have formed in the educated class. When Modi ji first used the word plastic surgery, he said, "Ye to humko pata hai, hamara parampara mein hai." This was done, you look at Ganesha. It's a very good example of plastic surgery. The whole country laughed at him. And a lot of intellectuals laughed at him. And he said, "Kya ho raha hai? This is, the RSS has gone mad. This is something that you cannot even think is, credible. What is this man talking, etc., etc." And they went on. But they did not attack so much Ganesha. They attacked the idea that plastic surgery was an Indian innovation. That is what they got upset about. Because you see, the educated middle class in India is very unique in the world. It is the only class that is educated to hate its own past, and to hate its own history, and to despise its own history. In no other world, or even to despise their own clothes, or to despise their own languages. Only food they don't despise. पेट के बारे में हम तो कुछ नहीं करेगा, because in food everybody will concede that we are at the top of the world, not at the bottom. But everything else we are totally disgusted with as far as we can. This is not something. So he said plastic surgery is a murk hai. How can anybody talk of plastic? Because plastic is a modern invention. Plastic has come with petrochemicals. So he said, how can you use plastic technology and say that this is something from our parampara? Incidentally, that was one of the things that I had taken from Dharampalji's earlier book, which is there in 18th Science, this book on science and technology in 18th century. And I had gone behind it and done further research to find out how many other pages and articles and so on had been written. And I myself was quite stunned. This was in 1976. And I will not go into it, but if you've got this booklet here, there are 2 or 3 pages on this plastic surgery business, which shows that the entire technique of plastic surgery is first given in the Sushruta Samhita. It's described there very much in detail. And that time they used to take the flap from the cheek and they used to reconstruct the nose. Or they used to take the flap from the forehead and they used to reconstruct the nose. Now why nose? Because in the old tradition, if you wanted to humiliate a person, you cut off his nose. And once you cut off his nose, he cannot appear in society. So it was useful not only in victory, when the victors would cut off the noses of the soldiers, but it was also useful if you found that your wife was with some other fellow in bed. So that fellow's nose also would be cut off. So everybody in the village would know that this fellow was up to some mischief. Now, once your nose is cut off, you see, then you are obsessed you want to somehow repair the nose because it symbolizes many things. So in India, an entire generation for the last more than I don't know how many hundreds of years of surgeons who did what we call plastic surgery. The word plastic surgery is used for the first time in 1897. But what does it mean? It means taking out one part of the body and grafting it on another. The entire operation is described in the Sushruta. You can go and look at it there. But then the British come to India. They begin to pick it up only in the 18th century, where they witness surgeons in Pune doing the surgery. The art of plastic surgery goes from India. First it goes to Italy in the 16th century. The Italians begin to innovate on it, and they begin to use also the arm, because the body is a remarkable invention. They used to remove a bigger flap if they wanted. Maybe they had bigger noses. The Italians must be having very long. So they would take it from some other portion, but that was all the initial. But it was always known as the Indian method. Even in the medical books, if you take a medical histories, you will find it is known as the medical method of Indian rhinoplasty. Rhino means nose. Plasty means the art of reconstructing of the nose. And from here, amazingly, it comes into England. There is a report in England in 1834 of an operation done on plastic surgery. And in 1835, Macaulay writes his famous minute where he says the entire contributions of India, all their sacred works can safely be discarded. They are, of course, in two different camps at that time. But this is the history of plastic surgery. When I was in Andhra Pradesh, I said, let me try this out. I was speaking to Andhra, 600 people in the college auditorium. So I said, how many people know that plastic surgery was invented in India? Nobody put up their hands. Not a single person in that educated classroom, I mean, it was a huge auditorium in Andhra University, knew simple thing like this. Now, to be fair, even I did not know about it. But Dharampalji wrote his book in 1977. And I'm surprised that 40 years later I have to speak about it in Benares Hindu University, which is supposed to be the spirit of India. And, I think I found some of the explanation in today's breakfast, where they gave us cornflakes and white bread. And I said, this is the end of the world. That you come to a canteen and you get white bread and cornflakes in a city like Benares. I think, poha kahan gaya? Where is the poha? There's some jalebi, something. Nothing was there. It's all eliminated, removed. Nothing is to be seen anymore. This is modern India for you. In the heart, in Kashi, in the heart of Hindustan. Now, this may have been plastic surgery, but of course he went on into other things. As I said, he went on into of course, there's a lot of discussion about the Indian science and technology, particularly metallurgy, the cast iron furnaces. Very few people know now there is a book. There is a book written about this by the National Institute of Advanced Study in Bangalore called Woods, or the Indian Art of Steel Making. And that whole book, now written by top class physicists from that institute, it documents exactly the process of making of Indian woods, that is Indian steel, which was of such astonishing character that it was taken to Sheffield when Sheffield experiments began, and it was the only steel on which you could make the Damascus sword. The famous Damascus sword, which was used in all armies all over the world, the Damascus sword, made in Damascus, but the steel came from Indian furnaces. They said that purity has never been achieved again. Again, part of the larger picture. When you took smallpox, again, I'm taking ideas just at random. You say smallpox, we are used to vaccination because vaccination comes from vacus. Vacus means cow, and Edward Jenner used the cow to experiment with and then came out with vaccination. But there was enough of inoculation practices in India, again very well documented by Dharampal ji in the book, which came to be known to the people in England. Now, there is not very, as Dharampal ji would use the word perhaps again, whether it was actually gone from here, whether somebody actually looked at it, whether somebody looked at the principle. Because in science, you always look at the principle, you don't look at the practice. Because the practice cannot go against science, it cannot go against nature. It's a scientific principle. Once you understand the principle, you can apply it. Just like as I said, the Italians, they said, oh, you take it from the forehead or from the cheeks. You can also take it from the armpits. The principle is there. The body will take a graft and you will be able to get a fresh thing all over again. So this is what is important to, in terms of principles, there was practically nothing. I am using the word very carefully. There was really nothing that this society in the 18th century really required from anybody from any part of the world. I give sometimes examples which Dharampal ji has not given. I take the example of our rice varieties. Now the documented rice varieties without having a single Indian Agriculture Research Institute or a Krishi Vigyan Kendra or an ICAR or an International Rice Research Institute, without having any of these institutions, India produced 300,000 varieties of rice. You will not believe it. Even now if you go to Cuttack, there are 62,000 varieties. You go to International Rice Institute, there are 70,000 varieties. You go to Raipur, there are 19,000 varieties. I know a farmer in Calcutta who has got 1,200 varieties on his own farm. And this is the variety of India. All these varieties have not come from scientific institutions. They are part of that innovation and capacity of peasants, farmers who know what they're dealing with. As Ashish Kamath said, it is material which is in your neighborhood. You grow with it. You know what to do with it. You understand it. And you know how to mix it and how to create new varieties and how to function. There's a very, very famous story which people ask me always to tell them is about Dr. Risharia. Dr. Risharia, you know, the famous rice research scientist. He was director of Central Rice Research Institute. You tell me when I can go on for 3-4 hours. You just tell me when I have to stop. So he was in the Central Rice Research Institute in Cuttack. So he used to go and collecting rice varieties. So he was in Madhya Pradesh at that time, and he went to the Adivasis and he was collecting the seeds. So the Adivasis told him, why are you collecting these seeds? You come to every year we have a haat. We have a market where all the people bring their varieties. And they keep them. You can keep one cup for me also. You can, usually they forget the main speaker. So, एक कप हमारे लिए रखिएगा। अरे चाय के लिए कोई आशा नहीं। You will understand it. So Risharia said, very good idea. I will go on the day of the Haat and I will collect all the varieties, and I don't have to go to every village, saves me a lot of time. But that was a farmers, they were willing to tell him that, come. They were generous. Abhi to patent, sab patent karne wale. At that time there was no issue of patent. Everybody was free to come. So he went to the annual fair, and then he started collecting all the varieties and putting in the pouch. And then he went to a corner of the rice varieties. There were some varieties there, he took those also. Then that Mukalam told him, see, those varieties you don't take. So then Risharia said, Kyo? He said, those varieties are different varieties. If you grow them, you will not get any seeds. So Risharia said, now this is an unpad man. I am director of Rice Research Institute. I've got PhD in monoclonal propagation of rice varieties. And he is telling me that if I take his seeds, they will not grow. So he took this. He said, नहीं मैं लेता हूँ, मैं प्रयोग प्रयास करता हूँ, देखता हूँ. He went back, put the plants into his field, and he had to go on a tour. You see that the plants came up very well, and he had to go somewhere for a conference. He went, When he came back, the first thing he did when he came back was he asked the assistants, इसका कुछ वो तो rice varieties का कुछ हुआ, पैदा हुआ कि नहीं? He said जरूर हुआ sir. Everyone had, but inside there was nothing. Entire intellectual tradition of this country, not just in theory, not just in mathematics, not just in science, but also in all the physical sciences, in the medical sciences, and also in the architecture, the Shilpa Shastras, the Natya Shastras, the Saundarya Shastras, everything, whatever was available in this, we brought back together in some attractive manner so that young people can look at it. Otherwise, our young people are already being diverted elsewhere. Already one whole generation has been diverted because of Macaulay. Now the second generation will also go. And once we go, there will nobody, even Dharampal ji, will consider himself a waste of time. So you have to take, as a result of this discussion, that is the reason why when I was called here by Rupesh ji, I said I will come because I am coming to Kashi and I am coming to a university, and I hope that this university can even now turn its head around and do something. Because there is no need for one more university doing the same thing that other universities are doing all over the world. There is no need. There is something that can be done differently. And there is some other area where we need to recover, as I said, the face and identity of this country. The intellectual identity, the traditions, the logic behind those traditions, the ethics behind those traditions, the ecology behind those traditions. Put them together in a reasonable way which will attract all the best scholars. Today the younger scholars are not going anymore into commerce. Commerce are only those who want some money, or those who go into computers who have got no brains at all. But those who want to go into wildlife, environment, ecology, all these are the brightest people. And the only way to attract them is to create a new environment in this place which will bring them together to recover what we are in danger of losing for all time to come. So thank you very much for listening to me, and thank you for the attention.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर, इतना सारगर्भित और रोचक अपने अनुभवों के साथ आपने जो प्रस्तुत किया है भारतीय विज्ञान का गौरव, जो धर्मपाल जी द्वारा प्रस्तुत किया गया था उसके प्रसंग में। आपका यह लेख, ये जो पुस्तिका सब लोगों को प्राप्त हुई है, 26 से पृष्ठ संख्या 30 तक प्रकाशित है, थोड़ा देख लेंगे। और आपने जो साहित्य उपलब्ध कराया है, मुझे लगता है कि अधिकतर लोग चाहेंगे कि उसे पढ़ें, और वो यहाँ उपलब्ध भी है के लिए। सर ने जो विवेचन किया है, मैं चाहूँगा कि अब वो सत्रीय अध्यक्ष श्री वी गिरिराज सर, उन्हीं के मुख से हम लोग सुने। मैं उन्हें सादर आमंत्रित करता हूँ कि आप आए।